Palisade Research has just published Palisade's top 3 uranium picks for 2017. Historically, junior uranium companies are where mining titans like Rick Rule and Robert Friedland have made much of their fortunes. For that reason, Palisade has just completed a detailed research piece identifying 3 companies poised to outperform in the upcoming uranium bull market. Visit palisaderadio.com and input your email to receive your free report. Welcome back to another episode of Palisade Radio. This is your host, Colin Cattell. On the show with us today is returning guest, economist, famed speculator, and best-selling author Doug Casey. Doug, pleasure having you back on the program.
Thanks, Colin.
I want to ask you how your book sales are going so far. Last time we talked, your book, The Speculator, had just come out, and there was quite a bit of excitement around the release. I read it, and a fantastic book. How's that going?
Very well. It takes a while for novels to get their legs because it's mainly a word of mouth type of thing. But I think since I spoke to you last time, John Williams, who is the founder of Autodesk, he's a billionaire. He lives in Switzerland, and he basically just reads books all year. And he reviews them on his website, and he gave Speculator the kudo of the best novel of 2016. I've never met John Williams. All he does is read books, and I think that's a fantastic award that he's given us. So it's doing fine, and in July we're going to come out with the second in the High Ground series, Drug Lord, and then it gets more radical from there. But I hope everybody reads Speculator because it's very relevant to today's world, especially for people under 30, I've got to say. I wish I'd read the book at that time in my life, but it didn't exist, obviously.
Well, speaking of relevance, I just got to see the movie Gold with Matthew McConaughey, and that's the movie based around the Briac scandal. I can't help but drawing comparisons between the Briac story and parts of the Speculator book. I don't know if you drew on that, but did you get to see the movie yet, Doug?
No, I haven't. I've certainly heard about the movie. What did you think of the movie?
My opinion was similar to the opinions of those online, which gave about a 50% rating. Knowing the Briac story myself, I think Hollywood took a few too many liberties with the story that were unnecessary. But, for somebody who doesn't know anything about mining, it was certainly exciting.
Well, I hope someday a movie's made out of Speculator. So I certainly wish McConaughey and Gold well.
Let's kind of pick up where we left off on the last interview. And when I interviewed you last, Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton were fighting to get the election, and everybody thought at the time that Hillary was going to win, myself included. You were one of the few people who thought that somehow Trump would pull it off and win, and I even saw you speak down in Argentina at the little conference there, which was only a few days before the election, where you once again mirrored your opinion that Trump would win in a landslide, and sure enough, he did. And a lot's kind of changed since then with the markets and commodities and maybe policy moving forward. What's your thoughts at this point?
Well, Trump has treated me well so far in several ways. First of all, Marin Katusa lost his bet and had to pay me 100 ounces of silver based upon my belief that Trump was going to win. And I had a large position in Northern Dynasty Mines, which has the largest gold-copper deposit, undeveloped gold-copper deposit in the world in Alaska, which has about quadrupled since then, since Trump is going to make it much easier. Hopefully he abolishes the EPA, but it's unlikely. You can't abolish these agencies once they're put into existence. So that's done well for me. And I like a lot of the things that Trump has done. He's apparently sincere in wanting to get rid of taxes and regulations to make America great again. On the other hand, he has no understanding of basic economics, as evidenced by his desire to put up walls and all this type of thing. So, I don't know. Listen, but you got to like Trump simply because the creatures in that cesspool of the deep state, the swamp, as he calls it, of Washington, D.C., that they hate him so viscerally on such a basic level. It almost seems to me like the U.S. is on the brink of a civil war, which isn't going to happen because the average American is too degraded and his brain is too addled with everything from Ritalin to Prozac to actually engage in a civil war. But these people really hate him, and he hates them, and it's really drawn battle lines. So I haven't seen anything like this in my lifetime, quite frankly. I think it's going to get ugly.
Trump does seem to be doing exactly what he said he was going to do. He's quite sincere. But as a self-described anarchist or libertarian, he's doing some things that might bother you as well. You mentioned putting up borders like the wall with Mexico, maybe his being against free trade and wanting to slap massive import tariffs, which could have some negative ramifications. And then he's certainly, at least in the media, seems like he's being very vocal against some countries, Iran, one that comes to mind. Does that worry you in terms of him maybe engaging in further war and following what Bush and Obama have set down as the standard these days?
Yeah, the most disturbing thing is that he seems to have a bee in his bonnet about destroying the Islamic State. And of course they're crazy, they're fanatical. But, you know, they're frankly, they're not going to hurt anybody. I mean, they're primitive religious fundamentalists, and it's not the problem of the U.S. sticking its nose into this thing. We have no idea who all these groups are or what they believe. And you go in there and you bomb them. The only thing you can be sure of is that everybody hates you. And it's adding to the bankruptcy of the U.S. What are we going to borrow more money from the Chinese in order to drop bombs on people in the Middle East? It's completely insane. So, yeah, it's good news, bad news with Trump, I'm afraid. But at least it's a lot of free entertainment. When you turn on your television, you can actually turn off the audio, which is almost uniformly left-wing in bias, and put on the Rolling Stones' Street Fighting Man in continuous loop for the next 4 years.
Well, let's change topics a bit to the economy. Since Trump got in, the Dow has continued to move up, and I think a lot of junior mining speculators and investors have a fear that we'll have a repeat of 2008, whereby the Dow Jones crashed, the general equities crashed, but it also brought down the mining stocks in a pretty horrific sell-off. And I didn't have that fear last year because the mining stocks were so darn cheap, but now that they're starting to move, a sell-off, a deflationary sell-off could affect both asset classes, the general equities and the junior mining stocks. Do you still fear that we're going to have a sell-off, and what effect for your portfolio?
It's entirely possible because you've got to remember that one definition of a depression is it's a period of time when distortions and misallocations of capital are liquidated. And that just about happened in 2008 and 9. So I'm afraid that Trump could actually go down in the books as the next Herbert Hoover, quite frankly. And that's a long story. Hoover was actually an awful president. He wasn't a free market guy. Au contraire. But Trump will be painted as a free market guy, rather incorrectly, I think. And as the Depression gets worse, it's going to besmirch free market philosophies and this type of thing. Yeah, I'm worried. This could happen again very easily. So it's a time for caution. Conservative action, actually.
If Trump were to follow in Hoover's footsteps, the industrial commodities would almost certainly get a lift, things like copper and iron ore. And I think a big surprise for a lot of people invested in this space has been that since the bull market commenced last year, we've had a huge lift in commodities, industrial and energy. Yet a lot of people before thought the precious metals were really going to be the place to be, and they may continue to be in the future. Are you surprised by the action in these industrial and energy commodities?
Well, I'm not really bullish on oil, quite frankly, because of two things. Well, more than two things. One is the fracking and horizontal drilling revolution in the U.S. and other places in the world is going to produce a lot more oil. Second thing is electric cars are the wave of the future. In fact, solar energy and battery power is the wave of the future. That's also going to reduce demand for oil. So to me, oil is mostly a political play on a war in the Middle East, which is very possible. So that's one thing. I'm not really interested in most of the industrial commodities at this point, frankly. I'm really going to stick with money, gold, and to a lesser degree, silver.
One of the worst performing commodities last year, maybe the worst, would be uranium. It's a commodity that you've made a lot of money on in the past, as have people like Marin and Rick Rule and many of the big names in the business. In fact, I met you for the first time. You probably don't remember meeting me, but at a uranium expo that my father put on back in 2006 out in Grand Junction, Colorado, and you gave a great talk then about why uranium was the place to be. Have you given any thought to the uranium bull that seems to have started back in November or December? The stocks are up over 100%.
That's right. And from a fundamental point of view, I'm very, very bullish on uranium. I've got to add that in there because of nuclear power, which remains the safest, the cheapest, and the cleanest form of mass power generation. We could talk a lot more about the details of why I say those things, which I know are counterintuitive to many people. But uranium is selling for about half of its production cost at the moment. And it's necessary to power about 400 nuclear plants in the world, and there are about 100 more under construction. So, yeah, I'm bullish on uranium.
Well, moving over to precious metals, Doug, I know this is where you've been the most vocal about the last few years. The debt levels worldwide are at historically high levels, and that should bode well for money, as you call it, being gold and silver. Let's talk about what you think might happen going through this year, maybe through, call it, the 4 years of Trump as he's going to be in. What do you see happening to precious metals?
I think that they're going up for a number of reasons. Not least of them is that the metals last peaked in 2011. Gold was over $1,900 an ounce, came down to about $1,100. It's moving back up. And gold is a chaos hedge. And I think we're going to see lots of financial chaos in the future. So there's going to be a lot more people putting money into gold, quite frankly, because all these governments of the world are creating trillions of new currency units, scores of trillions of new currency units every year. And a lot of that's going to filter into gold. There's going to be a panic at some point, and gold's going to go way, way up. So I mainly buy gold for safety, and I buy it out of prudence. But right now, I think it's an excellent speculative vehicle as well.
Doug, let's talk about specific areas of interest in the mining space, places that you might invest. Before we got on the call, you told me about Silver Wheat, and a company you had invested in at the very bottom several years ago, and it became the darling of, or one of the darlings of the last bull market there, seeing over 100-fold increase. Can you talk to us a little bit about streaming companies?
I think streaming companies and royalty companies are the safest, the most conservative way in getting into gold mining stocks, which are very risky. The idea with these things is that they will get paid off the top. As long as there's any metal mined, they get a percentage, basically, of the metal that comes out of the refinery, out of the smelter. So it's not a question of whether the company makes money or not. They get a 0.5% or 1 or 2 or 3 or 4%, whatever the number is, of all the metal that comes out of the refinery. And they do this by investing in the company early on. Companies like to do it because they don't have to sell shares. They can just sell a small portion of the metal that they're going to process. So it's a win-win. Now, they usually sell at a big premium to their earnings, but the good news is that they almost always have earnings, which most mining companies don't, or at least mostly don't.
Yeah, it's been a very resilient business model since it kind of became prolific about 10 or 15 years ago with Silver Wheaton coming to the stage. I guess a problem now is that a lot of the opportunities in the streaming and royalty space have been soaked up by the big guys like Silver Wheaton and Royal Gold and a couple other big companies out there. But I'm always excited to find out when we end up investing in a similar deal. There's a new small streaming deal called Metalla Royalty and Streaming, a company that you've apparently invested in. Can you talk about that as a interesting vehicle?
Well, I was a founding shareholder in Silver Wheaton way back when, and it was a fantastic investment. So I'm very interested in getting in early on any streaming or royalty company. So yeah, I got into Metalla because new companies are not well known. They don't have a track record. People don't know how good their management might be and so forth. But I think Metalla is going to work out right. It's very cheap. And there aren't a lot of companies in this space. There's only a half a dozen or so. So there's certainly room for one more. So I have very high hopes about this one. And because it's a royalty and streaming company, it's something you can actually hold for the long term, which is something that cannot be said about mining companies in general.
Most of the listeners here at Palisade Radio are very interested in mining. There's a varying degree of expertise in terms of how long people have been around, if they know the game, how to participate in financings, etc. But Doug, maybe just ending here, can you provide some basic ideas on how to make money in the sector or pitfalls to watch out from? It looks like we might have 3 or 4 or 5 very good years ahead, and everybody wants to capitalize on that. So suggestions?
If possible. Well, look, years ago, I developed something that is called the 9 Ps, which is a mnemonic to keep in mind before you put money into any mining company. These Ps that you want to automatically look for all 9 of them before you put money into a company. The first and most important one is people. Who are in back of it? Because good people make for good business. Bad people can screw up anything. And second is the property, and then is the financing with the pH and the politics of the country and so forth and so on. So that's number one, to always look at these basics and never buy a stock on a tout. Like we've discussed just now, this new company, Metalla. But to all your listeners, right now it's just a tout. They haven't heard of it before. They know nothing about it. So I don't put any money into anything without going on the internet and getting answers to the 9 Ps for any company, including this one, which is, I think, the only, well, we mentioned Silver Wheaton too, but that's been around for a long time.
Yeah, excellent. Well, Doug, I really appreciate you coming back on the program. I know you've got a busy schedule there, writing 6 more novels. I assume that the second one is near completion or done. But congratulations on the first one and getting some success there. It was a fantastic book, and I hope to be able to read the second edition very soon.
Well, much appreciated, Colin, and I hope to see you down in Cafayate, Argentina, if not someplace else sooner.
Great. Thanks, Doug.
think you understand the junior mining sector, and you think that the participants in the mining sector, junior mining sector, are good people and kind people, hit the bid.
How violent that term could be, it actually could be quite violent. It could be a rip-your-face-off uranium rally.
And the world is always going to need raw materials. It's going to need copper and gold and nickel and so forth.
Totally destabilized. Hey, troll, did you hear what's going on in Yemen? Or are you too stupid?